The Amazon River is an extraordinary force of nature. Stretching over 6,500 kilometers across the South American continent, it feeds the largest tropical rainforest on Earth. Its waters contain a great variety of fish, Not only is this the richest river on Earth, it is also the mightiest. Up to 100 meters deep and 40 kilometers wide, it carries more water than any river in the world. This precious resource has never been tamed by man. From source to sea, not a single bridge crosses its waters. Not a single dam halts its flow. But while the river cannot be controlled, it could be destroyed. Today, commercial development is killing the wilderness which protects the Amazon, and its future hangs in the balance. The crucial question now is, how long can this great river continue to run wild? The Amazon River has immense power over everything that lives near its waters. Though it flows through one of the most remote regions on Earth, 7 million people have made their home on the riverbanks. From isolated village to bustling metropolis, none of those who live near it can control the force of the Amazon. They have simply adapted to a life determined by the river. The power of its waters and the remote landscape through which it travels have for centuries protected the Amazon from man. Until recently, this rainforest was believed to be one of the world's most stable environments. But aggressive commercial development is destroying the jungle, and the protection it offers is being stripped away. Today, the delicate eco-balance of the region is being pushed to the point of no return. The Amazon River, its wildlife and its people are vulnerable as never before. From its Peruvian headwaters to its Brazilian delta, the Amazon River cuts across South America. Its river basin, the largest in the world, is riddled with 1,000 tributaries, all flowing towards the main artery of the Amazon itself. While its glacial source lies high in the Andean mountains of Peru, the Amazon's story proper begins here, over 1,800 kilometers downstream, where the Ucayali and Marañón rivers meet. Only at this confluence in the Peruvian rainforest does the river take on the name Amazon. A few kilometers downstream, Mariscal Castilla is one of the first villages on the Amazon. The Peruvian name for these villagers is Ribereños, literally meaning river people. Of Spanish and Indian descent, the Ribereños are not indigenous to the rainforest, but have adapted to live at the water's edge and developed an intimate relationship with the natural environment. Coping with the shifting waters is part and parcel of life here, particularly during the river's seasonal floods. In the wet season, increased rainfall over the forest dramatically increases the amount of water in the river. In a typical flood, levels rise by up to 20 meters, and the area covered by the river triples. It is this immense fluctuation in flow which makes the Amazon impossible to control. And so the ribereños have no choice but to adopt a lifestyle which accommodates the river's extreme floods. Their houses are designed for this purpose, built on stilts to allow flood water to flow beneath. But this is not always enough to keep them safe. For not only does the Amazon flood, it changes course so dramatically that a village could suddenly find itself at the bottom of the new river channel. Maria Pizango has lived in Mariscal Castilla all her life. In the last 10 years, she has had to rebuild her home several times to avoid the roaming waters.
The river started to erode the riverbank. Before this platform was washed away, I ordered a new house to be built over there. So I had to move there before my house disappeared with the riverbank.
The huge volume of water in the Amazon means it can easily change its course through the flat terrain and soft soils. When the river moves, the people have no choice but to move with it. Yet the ribereños live here not despite, but because of the river's ever-shifting flood patterns. For it is this which makes the riverbanks, or vazia as they are known, the richest tracts of land in the whole rainforest.
Here I've got the tomatoes, the chiclayo and the potatoes which we eat. And here are the cucumbers. We also grow yucca for food.
The magic ingredient which makes this land so fertile is silt. Washed down from the Andes Mountains, suspended in the murky brown waters of the river. When the Amazon floods, this mineral-rich silt is distributed over the earth, rendering the ground remarkably productive. These vazia floodplains can support continuous agriculture, albeit on a small scale.
This year, the river has replenished the mud, and that's why my rice is over there. Last year, that didn't happen, and my rice failed to grow. This time, there was more mud. It came up to here to irrigate the rice.
To maintain the fertility of the soil, the ribereños only clear small patches of land at a time and grow many different varieties of crops in the same area. As well as providing fertile soil, the river also provides fish to eat, and the locals have developed unique ways of catching them. These men are collecting leaves from the huaca plant for fishing. First, the huaca leaves are crushed to release their juices. Next, the crushed leaves are transferred to a basket and dipped several times in one of the many river pools near Mariscal Castilla village. As the huaca poison is released, it depletes the oxygen in the water, making the fish drowsy and forcing them to the surface for air. Once they are within reach of the ribereños' spears, they are easy prey. To survive on the riverbank, the ribereños have come to develop a deep understanding of the river and to accept that it holds absolute power over their destiny. But subsistence farming is a precarious existence, and an increasing number of ribereños are leaving the seclusion of their vazia villages in search of a better life. Many end up here, 125 kilometers downstream, in the city of Iquitos, the jungle metropolis. Perched at the junction where the Amazon meets two major tributaries, Iquitos has 400,000 residents. Today, some 70% of the population of the Amazon basin lives in cities like these. Even in the jungle, urbanization is a growing trend. Surrounded by water and rainforest, Iquitos can't be reached by road. Travel within the city is mostly by rickshaw. Travel to and from the city is by plane and boat. Even though it is over 3,700 kilometers from the sea, Iquitos is saved from total isolation by the water highway that is the Amazon River. This waterway provides the city with a precious commercial link to the outside world. But this link comes at a price. At just 106 meters above sea level, the residents of Iquitos have no means of controlling the waters which surround them. Life here is lived at the mercy of the river. The suburb of Belén is a perfect example. During the wet season, Belén can only be reached by boat. Many of the houses here are built to float on the rising waters. Houses that don't float are designed to be flooded. Families who live in these two-story homes move their possessions to the upper levels during the wet season, allowing the ground floor to be swallowed up by water. When the floods have receded, the family claim back that half of their home, only to give it over to the river again next year. Most of the people in Belén live in poverty. Many are migrants who have left remote river settlements in search of a better life in the city. But with high unemployment and without land to grow their own food, they struggle to feed their families, living in cramped housing with no electricity and no running water. Under these conditions, the damp and humid atmosphere of the Amazon takes its toll. Malaria and respiratory diseases are commonplace. Ronald Gonzalez is a doctor who works at this drop-in clinic for the poorest residents of Belén. There are always more patients than he has time to see. This child is 5 years old. He has been brought to the clinic by his mother, who's worried about his persistent cough. Dr. Gonzalez believes that the child's condition is directly caused by living near the river.
The child has a chest complaint. He's got acute bronchial obstruction syndrome, asthma in short, and so he will be given treatment. This acute bronchial obstruction syndrome is more virulent when children live in very humid areas, such as here, close to the river. Excessive humidity in the morning and at night closes the bronchi, so that he can't breathe easily. He coughs a lot and can't sleep.
But perhaps the greatest danger to people's health is not the air, but the water itself, as the river in Iquitos is increasingly polluted. In these shanty towns, there is no sewer system to deal with the waste produced. Latrines empty into the river canals. During the dry season, people walk the plank along the wooden pathways to avoid the human excrement which flows beneath. During the floods, the waste gets carried by the river into people's houses. What's more, the poorest residents of Iquitos have no piped drinking supply. They're forced to use the untreated river or rainwater for their daily use, to disastrous effect. Child mortality rates in Belén are shockingly high.
Intestinal infections like dysentery and non-dysentery diarrhea are caused mainly because people have no access to clean water to drink. Bacterial, viral and gastrointestinal infections are very common here.
It's ironic that though the Amazon carries more fresh water than the combined capacity of the next 8 largest rivers on Earth, people who live on its banks don't have clean water to drink. Yet the river itself is largely to blame, for the Amazon floods and changes course so dramatically it can't be relied upon to provide a piped water supply. In the last few years, the river has moved away from the center of Iquitos. What was deep water one year became dry riverbed the next. But where humans struggle to cope, nature has no problem. As it leaves Iquitos, flowing from Peru into Brazil, the Amazon runs more or less parallel with the equator, where the Earth receives maximum energy from the sun. Under these conditions, wildlife thrives in many specialized forms. The Amazon's flooding creates a unique environment to which nature adapts in the most remarkable way. The flooded forests are a great example. These waterlogged jungles occupy swathes of land up to 20 kilometers either side of the river. During the wet season, the soil in which these plants grow is underwater. The smaller trees are completely submerged. To survive, they grow roots, anchoring themselves against the force of the floods. Some trees even grow new roots, reaching down from their branches to absorb nutrients from the water. What we know about the wildlife of the Amazon just scratches the surface. The area covered by the river basin is so vast that there are still tributaries which have yet to be explored, and thousands of plants and animals which are uncatalogued. Scientists are continually working to understand the extremely complex ecosystem of this region. One of the Amazon's many wildlife research projects is based here, at the Piranha Reserve in the middle reaches of the Amazon. Working from a floating laboratory, Maria Suarez is director of the operation.
We measure and weigh the fish. First we weigh it, then we measure it and remove the stomach, so we have an idea of what its feeding habits are. This information is very important, as the main aim of the project is to compile and compare data.
The Piranha Reserve is home to a huge variety of fish, perfectly adapted to living in this underwater jungle.
During the flood season, lots of trees produce various types of fruit, which provide an excellent source of nourishment for the many species of fish. Here, for example, is a tarumá fruit in the stomach of a sardine. It's a long sardine, a species of the triporteus, and it's a smart fish for eating tarumá. Tarumá is a very tasty fruit. Even people can eat it. It's sweet and tasty, and the tree itself is also beautiful.
In this symbiotic relationship, the trees also benefit as the fish distribute their fruit seeds in their droppings. The fish supported by the river are a crucial food source for the ribeirinhos who live on Piranha Reserve. In return for protected fishing rights, they share their local knowledge with the researchers. helping them track the migratory paths of fish and identifying new species.
Como é que é a rota dos peixes? Eles vêm de onde? O Manacapuru está aqui, por exemplo. Isso a gente conhece como Paraná, daí do reitor de baixo mesmo, né?
It's priceless information in a place where only a fraction of the wildlife has been scientifically documented.
Na bacia Amazônia há uma estimativa de 2.000.
In the Amazon basin, there are currently 2,000 museum catalogued species. But we can conservatively estimate that there are, in fact, some 3,000 species. Why is this a conservative estimate? Because there are still a lot of narrow river channels and river pools that have not yet been surveyed.
Fazer os levantamentos taxonômicos.
Working in collaboration with local people, research projects like this one discover some 50 new species of fish every year. The knowledge gained helps the ribereños both exploit and protect the ecosystem upon which their livelihood depends. There is one animal, however, that the ribereños dare not hunt: the legendary Boto dolphin. Up to 3 meters long and weighing some 90 kilos, the Boto vary in color from grey to pink. With a brain 40% larger than humans, they are supremely intelligent and naturally playful. João de Lima is a fisherman who's had many a close encounter with the Boto.
If the dolphin thinks you're afraid of it, lots more dolphins will turn up, and they will try and tease you. If you're in a small canoe, smaller than this one, they'll try and drown you.
The dolphin's mischievous nature has fueled all kinds of local myths. Rumour has it, at night, the Boto emerge from the river to court local women.
Yes, it appears like me in the form of a male, a physical body. It approaches women, and believe me, this is true, it really happens. Even here, it has happened. Often, they take advantage of women when they're vulnerable.
Though they're not really able to walk on land, these dolphins have evolved perfectly to suit their environment. Practically blind, since there's not much to see in the murky river waters, they hunt their prey with sonar detectors and have a flexible backbone to weave their way through underwater vegetation. The Amazon dolphins are not the only river dolphins in the world, but they are one of the few types that are thriving, protected by the untamed river. In the remote Piranha Reserve, the Boto and the fishermen have developed an understanding. But elsewhere on the Amazon, commercial development is placing animals and humans in direct conflict. Some 4,000 kilometers downstream of its source, the dark and clear waters of the Rio Negro join the muddy flow of the Amazon. For 11 kilometers, the black and brown waters flow side by side, before finally mingling to create the largest river in the world. Over 8 kilometers wide and 100 meters deep, at this point, the Amazon is a trade superhighway along which products can be exported from the heart of the rainforest directly to sea. Upstream of the confluence, the city of Manaus is perfectly positioned to take advantage of the river's commercial potential. Today, Manaus is a trading point for all kinds of cargo. To accommodate the growth, Manaus's city limits are expanding further and further into the surrounding rainforest, encroaching on the wilderness and its wildlife. One of the most common animals here are caimans, crocodilian reptiles. In the 1980s, caimans were an endangered species, but a project to save them has led to an explosion in their numbers. Some believe several million caimans now live along the Amazon, outnumbering and posing a real danger to the human population. For those who make a living on the water, the risks are deadly. Aldelsimir Cardoso is a fisherman who was attacked by a caiman a few years ago.
As I was removing the fish and sorting them out, I didn't pay attention to this side, and the caiman jumped about a meter high straight at me. He was aiming for my head, and so I saw that it was an animal. I was able to move my head this way and threw out my arm. It grabbed my arm and flooded the boat. It was heavy and 5 meters long, and it started to drag me away.
In the 20-minute struggle that followed, the caiman tried to drag Aldelsimir underwater by his arm.
It broke in 4 parts. This joint was severed here. This finger was severed. It was only attached here.
Only by playing dead did Aldelsimir get away with his life. But dealing with the local wildlife is just one of the challenges of urban development. For as its economic revival continues, Manaus's electricity needs are also increasing. One of the greatest potential power sources in the entire Amazon region is the river itself. It's a force that developers would love to harness, particularly in Brazil, where 80% of all the country's electricity is created by hydropower. So far, the Amazon has not been dammed. It's too big to control, and with a gradient of less than 100 meters over most of its course, it's just too slow to produce electricity. But many of the hundreds of tributaries which join the Amazon have much faster currents. And it's these arteries which are being clamped in the race to produce hydropower. Some 150 kilometers east of Manaus, on the Watumia tributary of the Amazon, is Balbina Dam. Today, the lake formed by the dam looks beautiful and tranquil. But in the 1980s, when it was built, it caused so much environmental damage that Balbina was dubbed one of the greatest errors ever committed in the Amazon. Its story sounds a terrible warning of the dangers of damming a river in the rainforest. Before it was built, the developers claimed that Balbina would flood some 2,360 square kilometers of rainforest to produce 250 megawatts of electricity, most of which would be fed to Manaus. From the outset, environmentalists were critical of how much jungle would be lost to produce such modest amounts of power. What's more, many indigenous communities lived in the area which was to be flooded. Their homes and livelihoods would be destroyed when the waters rose. As opposition reached fever pitch, the authorities decided to end the debate without warning, closing the floodgates 30 days early. The effects were catastrophic. The engineers grossly underestimated the area which would be submerged. When the floodgates closed, the water spread out everywhere over the flat landscape. Animals and humans fled for their lives. Elidio da Silva is one of the local people who witnessed the carnage.
Most of the animals that were killed at that time were monkeys. The monkeys died because in this large area, as you can see, there weren't many islands left.
As he watched tens of thousands of animals drown, Elidio joined a desperate mission to rescue as many as possible.
We went out to collect the animals, to move them to the higher land, to save them. We could only save a few. Many more died, mainly because we didn't have enough boats to collect all the animals.
Not only was the habitat destroyed, so too was the water, for in the haste to fill the dam, the area had not been cleared of jungle. As the trees rotted down, the reservoir became slick with scum, killing the fish and poisoning the local drinking supply.
The water was so bad, we couldn't drink it. So the company provided some water wells, but they weren't proper wells. It was just a gesture to keep the people happy.
As the water pumps also began to draw toxic water, the residents of Old Balbina were relocated to a purpose-built village on higher land. Here they remain today, surrounded by modern amenities, but deprived of their traditional way of life. In the new Balbina, unemployment and alcoholism are high. Despite the lessons of Balbina, there are many more dams planned for the Amazon basin as South America's energy demands increase. But in recent years, the region has seen dramatic changes in climate, which threaten to put a halt to all hydropower plans. Downstream of Manaus, where the Rio Negro and Amazon meet, Catalão is one of the many lakes formed by the roaming waters. Though they have no running water or electricity, the community which lives here are used to coping with life on the river. Every house in the village is designed to float. Even the builders here work on water. But in 2005, life changed in a way these villagers could never have imagined. In the summer of that year, the Amazon suffered the worst drought on record, wreaking havoc in the region. On Lake Catalão, the residents found themselves totally isolated. Raimunda Viana remembers the effect it had on the community.
Foi assim pra gente assim uma calamidade, né?
For us, the situation was a disaster. There was a lot of hunger because the fish died. The floating houses were stranded, there was no water, and we had to walk to get to the river. We had to carry water on our heads and bring it back for washing and drinking.
The villagers became desperate as the shrinking waters filled with dying fish. When their food and water supplies dwindled to nothing, the people congregated every day at the church to pray for an end to their suffering.
So we begged God to send rain. And when the rain came, people would be by the gutter, collecting the water in little bowls from the gutter, just for something to drink, and to avoid carrying the water in the hot sun.
The situation was the same all over the Amazon. River waters receded so far that boats became stranded. There were even stories of fish being cooked alive in the heat of the shallow waters. As the river dried up, the jungle suffered too. Transformed from wet sponge to tinderbox, an area of more than 1,000 kilometers square was lost to forest fires. The smoke prolonged the crisis, inhibiting the formation of clouds and making the drought worse.
E o Espírito Santo se move em você. Você tem valor.
When their prayers were answered and the rains eventually arrived, the people of the Amazon assumed the drought of 2005 was a once-in-a-lifetime event. But a year later, the droughts returned. As a pattern emerges, scientists are beginning to question why this river is suffering such unprecedented change. Many blame deforestation for the increase in droughts. Trees are the water towers of the Amazon, drawing moisture from the ground and releasing it into the atmosphere until it eventually falls again as rain. But an area of jungle the size of 6 football pitches is cut down every minute, destroying the water cycle which is the lifeline of this region. What's more, the burning of forests is increasing global warming and the likelihood of further droughts. For though the trees of the Amazon produce more than 20% of the oxygen on Earth, deforestation fires are now responsible for 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions. For the river, the crisis is even more immediate, as most of its water comes from precipitation. Without rain from the rainforest, the Amazon as we know it would cease to exist. And the further the river continues on its eastward course, the greater the threat becomes. Downstream of Manaus is the city of Santarém. Positioned at the confluence of the Tapajos and Amazon rivers and fed by thousands of kilometers of jungle highway, Santarém is a vital export terminal for rainforest products. Of all the cargo processed here, the most profitable is soya. Ships laden with soya beans sail from Santarém directly to Europe and the United States, where the soya is used to feed animals destined for the supermarket and fast food chains. But this seemingly inert cargo poses a deadly threat to the Amazon and to the people. For soya is now the main engine of deforestation in the whole region. 1,200,000 acres of prime rainforest have been cut down to make way for the crop. Much of the jungle being cleared is home to indigenous tribes and traditional communities. But the massive profits to be made mean that some developers will stop at nothing to get their hands on new land. Those who stand in their way risk being gunned down. It's a fact which Maria dos Santos knows only too well. As president of the Workers' Union, she has received several death threats for defending the rights of local farmers against the soya magnates. For the last 2 years, she's been protected by 24-hour armed guard.
What moves me is knowing that people are slowly getting their rights. It's about facing, fighting. Maybe it wouldn't be dangerous if we didn't want to face the enemy, but we decided this was the approach the union would take.
Soya is a relatively new threat to the Amazon. The biggest cause of deforestation used to be logging and cattle ranching. Recently, however, developers realized that the vast tracts of land available here were ideal for the production of soya, which is only profitable when grown in huge quantities. The first region to be exploited was Mato Grosso in the far south. But it was only a matter of time before the soya magnates arrived in Santarém.
By 1999 or 2000, we'd already heard that they were on their way, that the soya farmers would arrive in our region. Some people tried to explain it to us, but we never really knew what it meant. We didn't prepare ourselves for this.
The most obvious symbol of soya's arrival in Santarém was the construction of the privately owned export station next to the city docks. Built without planning permission, the legality of this station is still being debated in the courts. The first Santarém's residents knew of it was when the city beach was suddenly replaced by an immense industrial platform. Soon after, however, the implications hit home as local farmers were forced to sell their land to the more unscrupulous soya magnates. Since most rural workers had no documents to prove they owned their farms, making them sell was relatively easy.
So they would register the land, and then they'd say to the people living on it, look, now we have this documentation, either you accept our offer or you leave with nothing. They threatened to call the police, so the farmers would accept, some 5,000, 10,000 in ignorance. They'd even say to him, look, you can go to the city and buy a house there, and you'll have a better life. You can watch TV and leave this wilderness which has no electricity. And so the people would fall for this con.
Many of the rural migrants come here, to Santarém's shantytown suburbs. But they soon realize that $10,000 does not go very far in the city. In the countryside, they could grow their own crops for food and profit, whereas here they have nothing to create an income. These back streets are full of desperate families who have lost everything to the greed of the soya industry. These are the kind of people Maria tries to help. Among them is a woman who doesn't want to be identified for fear of her life. 5 years ago, she and her husband fled to the city when their rural village was burned to the ground by guerrillas working on behalf of the soya magnates.
When we got to the city, God gave us this place, and the people here helped us. This hut was built by the people.
After reaching the city, however, her husband took part in a compensation claim against the soya farmers. Now, he has a price on his head.
When I used to walk through the city, people would say to me, "They are making plans to kill your husband." I was in such a state that I couldn't eat anymore. When my husband came here, I asked him to stop everything. The poor can't challenge the rich, because the rich have money to kill people. You might as well already be dead, I used to say to him.
For Maria and for the people of Santarém, the fight for justice continues. Meanwhile, the threat from soya is increasing. Several new roads are planned in the Amazon, which will cut through the rainforest, establishing new trade routes and opening new areas to development. In all this, the river continues to be the most vital link of the export corridor. From Santarém, the heavily laden ships continue eastwards before the Amazon finally meets the ocean. More than 240 kilometers wide, the river enters the sea with such power that it pushes the salt water back hundreds of kilometers from land. In the incredible force of this flow, the soya and other products of the rainforest are carried away to market. But in forming a part of the commercial chain, the river is a tool of its own destruction. For the rainforest and the river are interdependent. What destroys one will undoubtedly destroy the other. Today, the Amazon River still carries 1/5 of all the world's fresh water. For the people who live near it, the river still dictates the place and pace of life. But it's clear that the Amazon can no longer escape the influences of the modern world. For how long the last great untamed river on Earth will continue to run wild remains to be seen.